Well, welcome everybody. I think we're now broadcasting. So welcome to the panel, and thank you to my panelists. About 10 years ago, I was working at a school in New Zealand, and there was a student there that I was particularly close with. He was a great kid. He was fun. And he was very kind-hearted. He was a little bit naughty, but I think that just added to the enjoyment. Whilst I was there, he started going through a particularly tough time at home. It was a challenging time, a time that any of us would have struggled with. And the impact on his life at school became apparent very quickly. His behavior deteriorated and his academic performance deteriorated. Luckily, the school that we were in was a fantastic school with great social emotional support. There was a professional counselor that helped him get through that specific situation, but more importantly, the staff there were all trained, and the support structures were in place that helped him prepare to be in that situation and then to get him through that situation and support him beyond. And for me, that showed the importance of social emotional learning. I think if he'd been at a school with less support, he wouldn't be where he is today. And so that's what we're here to talk about today, to talk about social emotional learning with a particular lens around the digital world. How is the fact that there's always Snapchat and Facebook and everything else in people's pockets, how is that adding additional challenges to our students' lives? And what are some of the ways we can support them, potentially using technology to get closer to our students? So as I said, I'm very lucky to be joined by an amazing panel here today, and I'll get them to introduce themselves in a moment because I don't want to miss anything, all the amazing experience they have. To just discuss the format quickly, we're going to spend about 40 minutes as a panel having a discussion around social emotional learning. We'll talk about kind of the state of social emotional learning in schools at the moment, and then we'll look at some strategies around what you can do on Monday to start implementing in your school. And at the end of the 40 minutes, we'll have a question and answer session. So please use the Q&A app, throw your questions up there, vote on other people's questions, and hopefully we'll have plenty of time to get to a number of those questions. There's also, from the Education on Air page, there's a resources document. In there, there's lots of great resources. We encourage you to open that up. Our panelists may be referring to some of those resources throughout this discussion, but certainly useful going forward to look at. So without further ado, I will ask my panel to introduce themselves. Greg.
Yes, so I'm Greg Callaham. Currently, I'm an assistant principal at Alpha Public Schools, which is a charter schools. We have a middle school and high school in San Jose, California. Next year, actually, I'll be moving into a director of social emotional learning role because the last 2 years I've been developing our social emotional curriculum and programming at Alpha. Before that, I was a math teacher and kind of developed curriculum on the side while I was working with my students as well in that context.
Keith?
So my name is Keeth Matheny. I am a a teacher. I teach 300 students every year. I teach social emotional learning. I'm also an instructional coach for the district, and I'm a national model teacher for School Connect, which is a curriculum that I helped author and I go around and speak and train about. And I'm excited to be here.
And Trish.
Good morning. My name is Trish Schaefer. I am the coordinator for social and emotional learning in Washoe County School District, and we are fortunate to also be one of the 8 districts working closely with CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic and Social and Emotional Learning, on system-wide implementation of SEL in an urban setting. So we have around 100 schools and over 64,000 students, and working towards implementing social and emotional learning on a systems level with every teacher, pre-K through 12.
Great. So as you can see, a ton of experience in the classroom to share with us today. So I'm really, really happy you can all be here. So thank you. So to kick things off, just like when we talk about social emotional learning, it's almost getting to kind of buzzword standards. Fantastic. Robin.
Hi.
One more panelist. Robin, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone. Sorry it took me so long to get here. I'm Robin Stern. I'm the Associate Director of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, and I'm delighted to be part of the call. Thank you.
Great. I'm glad we got you on here. So yeah, so SEL, it's something that's getting thrown around a lot. But what actually is SEL? And what are schools? How are schools doing? What's kind of the state of SEL in schools at the moment? Trish, maybe you could start.
Sure. Social and emotional learning, we define it as a process for helping both children and adults develop the fundamental skills for life effectiveness. It's a process in which we all learn how to handle ourselves, our relationships, our work, ethically and effectively. And I think it's important to note there that some key words. First, you'll see process. So it's not something that you arrive at and can check the box that you become fully self-aware as a second grader or a 12th grader or even as an adult. And the other component that I think is important is that it's children and adults. And when you're talking about this work in a school district, it's talking about the work that we do as a community. So we're talking about our children, our staff, our families. This is how we do business within our community, and talking about spreading that work and completing that work at all levels. When we talk about social and emotional learning within a school district context, we talk about it within 5 competencies defined by CASEL. We talk about self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and then responsible decision-making. I think we can all agree that today's students face a more complex, economically challenging, globally connected world in which they are asked to thrive in, and they need these skills in order to become effective citizens. Looking at the state of social and emotional learning in schools, I think I would be remiss if I personally mentioned CASEL and the 8 districts running the collaborative districts initiative, asking 8 school districts to really implement social and emotional learning on a systems level in an urban setting. Since then, they have also expanded it and are working with rural counties, since 85% of our nation's school districts are smaller, not the urban size. But then you also see this movement coming about. We have all 50 states have pre-K SEL standards. Over 11 of them have the free-form standing SEL standards for kindergarten through adult. And within the legislative sessions, we're seeing more and more of that come about. I'm hopeful we'll also see this as a hot topic in the next presidential election too, when you look at the national work that's going on. And it doesn't seem like there's a week that goes by that you can't find an article in the New York Times, in the Wall Street Journal, your local paper, really addressing the need for social and emotional learning for our students. I also think we're seeing it with groups like the National Association of State Board of Education. They're talking about from practice to policy. So this grassroots movement has really taken front row in terms of the political forum, the policy, but also educators are hungry for it. I think our kids are hungry for it, our parents are hungry for it, and our business community is hungry for people who can handle themselves well with these skills and really jump into the job market, whether they go to college or a highly skilled career.
So Robin, you approach it from a slightly more academic perspective. When you look at schools, are we doing enough in schools at the moment with regard to social and emotional learning?
Well, first of all, Trish, I completely agree with everything you said, and thank you. I think that was a great overview. I would like to add to that something that perhaps makes it more personal and understandable for any educator or parent involved in a school community or a student. And that is to think about the fact that we have emotions all day long. The time we wake up in the morning to the time we get to bed at night, we are on a roller coaster of emotions. And so since we know that we have emotions all day long, and we know, and we've studied for decades, that emotions matter for 5 significant areas of life. They matter for attention, memory, and learning. And this is incredibly, obviously relevant in school. They matter for decision-making and judgment. We've all made bad decisions, right? And those decisions have often been driven by our emotions. And we've made good decisions too, often driven by our emotions. Emotions impact our relationships. Emotions impact our physical and mental health. And emotions impact our everyday effectiveness. So if we know we have emotions all day long, and we know that they matter for these significant areas of life, how do we get smarter about our emotions, right? And then So of course we believe that, and you all believe that emotional intelligence is the way to get smarter about your emotions, right? So at the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, we think of emotional intelligence as the translation of emotional intelligence into schools, social and emotional learning, as the learning of 5 particular skills, the acronym RULER: recognizing, understanding, labeling, expressing, and regulating emotions. So when we attend to emotions that matter so much with these skills, then we're able to better understand and manage our emotions. And Trish, like you suggested, we start with the adults. Like, adults matter too. And because we know that our students and our colleagues are watching us. From the school leaders to the teachers in every classroom to your home life. Kids are watching you. And so you're modeling the skills all the time. So it's up to us to train and work with adults in the school communities as well. And right now what we know is that this work is really at a tipping point. It is time that this is moving forward. And to that end, or in that spirit, we just launched a very exciting initiative at the Yale Center called the Emotion Revolution. And our Emotion Revolution is all of our Emotion Revolution in partnership with Lady Gaga's Born This Way Foundation and Facebook and the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. We're asking kids all over the country to tell us how they feel in schools and how they want to feel in schools. And we're hoping to use that data, which will be significant numbers of kids weighing in about what they're actually feeling right now and what they want to be feeling. Want to use that data to move the dial and to expand the conversation politically through politicians, Washington, state by state, but also our educational leaders, because we really want to shift the school climate.
So this is jumping ahead a little bit from what I was planning. But Greg, you've been implementing some strategies in your classroom to try and understand your students' social emotional state. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so across our school, it's part of our programming. This is not meant to be a plug for Google Forms, but we use a Google form to do this. But we do digital check-ins with our students, and so every morning, first thing, they fill out a digital check-in, which is a very quick form that kind of identifies how they're feeling that morning, and they have an optional, we make it optional just because we don't want to force kids to be sharing things that they don't want to share, but an optional why are you feeling that way that they can submit instantly. The teacher can get it in the spreadsheet, instantly see every student in the classroom, in 5 minutes, and be able to do a quick scan and see where they're at and know where to follow up immediately. And then the other thing we do is actually it sets up so that it sends notifications to me, so I know that I can check in on students and kind of look through that digital check-in and know kind of instantly with students that are struggling where they're at, and I can even check up on them in that day. And then on top of that, we have an additional sort of link that it goes to if they need someone to talk to right away, if they're like really coming in and struggling, and then we do some work with them to make sure they understand what that would mean to ask for that help. But then I get actually a text that lets me know if there's a student that like right that minute needs support, and then we can kind of get our counselors involved if there's something bigger going on. And so we found like through this process, on top of just being able to get to know our kids better in just sort of a very general way, because sometimes they're sharing, happy news about like their cousin just had a baby or something like that, like all the way to when they're having struggles at home or something that we wouldn't actually be able to catch otherwise because they wouldn't feel comfortable saying it right out. We've actually found that through this we've identified kids really quickly who are struggling at home, things are going on, some of the sort of sad things that are happening with their students, we're finding quick that we can actually help them before it gets out of hand, or that we can find them help right away. So yeah, it's been actually pretty amazing. Like we just kind of started doing it just to try it out, and it's definitely picked up in the way that we want to keep going and growing.
I think that's a really exciting potential practice, and one of the things that I really believe is that teaching and learning is a relationship. In fact, I know Tim Schreiber says that often, and I think that understanding where kids are coming into the room is a really big deal. And as a teacher, the way that I try to do that is I greet every kid at the door and shake their hand and look in their eyes and kind of feel where they are when they walk in the door. But having a way where they could, in a little bit more of a safe environment, express more information could be really powerful. And I just want to chime in back to what both Trish and Robin said. You know, I really feel like what I know is that SEL is a huge national wave right now that is making a major impact on school reform. And that teaching and learning these skills in schools has already had a dramatic impact on student lives. There's a recent meta-analysis that many of you guys, probably everybody on the panel knows about, that was by Durlick and Weisberg, that found, after studying 270,000 students, that found that compared to controls, SEL participants demonstrated significantly improved SEL skills, attitudes, behavior, and academic performance, and possibly most interesting, an 11-point gain in academic achievement. These skills are critical skills to our students. In addition, this past February, Columbia University released a study on the economic value of social emotional learning, finding that SEL programs pay off at a rate of more than $11 of benefit to every $1 spent. I put both these resources in the Google Docs for you guys to look at. In addition, I work for Austin Independent School District, and you know, our district has got a ton of people working on this project, and you know, we're part of the Castle Collaborating Districts Initiative, and our director Sherry Raven is really fantastic, and we have a great program. And I put the link to, you can see everything that's going on and all the different programs. It's an awesome resource. But simply put, I think our students desperately need SEL programs, and I'm thrilled to be part of this panel, because not implementing these types of programs in school is inviting a number of social and emotional issues, many of which I think are currently plaguing our schools. And we need to do more with this, and hopefully there's a way to use media, a way to use technology to do a little bit of this better.
So this is all great, and there's $11 benefit, etc. But you're teaching in a classroom. You've got a high-stakes test coming up where they need to know the facts. Easy to say this, but where's the time coming for the teacher to do this?
I could jump in here just because we just had a high-stakes test this week, and we're still doing social emotional learning. So we carve out time for our teachers twice a week to have 45-minute classes with their core students to very directly be teaching social emotional learning, because we found that our students perform much better academically when we're actually addressing this, when we are kind of taking the time to build those relationships and understand where they're at, but also helping them communicate with each other, develop skills in terms of handling stress, which is, coming to high-stakes tests, our students feel it, and just kind of things like that. We've really found that they're using some of these coping skills that we're teaching them in preparation for the test, but they're also using in the classroom with each other to help build a community where they're actually supporting each other, they're helping each other prepare for the test, they're helping each other study and just kind of build each other up in skills where when we weren't doing this, because a few years ago we weren't doing this, we just didn't see that kind of culture happening in the classroom. Students were sort of independently trying to struggle through and figure it out themselves because they either didn't know how to communicate with each other in a way that helped each other get that help, or they didn't have that community. So for us, it's, again, sort of there's the financial payoff, but just in terms of time, we actually get a lot of that time back because of the way the students are helping each other. That actually makes it easier for the teacher to kind of step in and focus on students who need extra help, because the other students are actually helping each other and knowing how to work together in a way that supports each other and really does free up staff time to really focus on other academic skills that maybe they're missing.
See, I think Greg is right on point. In fact, there's so many times when I'm talking to schools or teachers and they're saying, hey, another initiative, I don't have time for another initiative. And I think, simply put, SEL is a time maker, not a time taker. That when you teach students how to manage their emotions, you get more time on task. You get less time, trying to correct or classroom manage. If the students can manage their own emotions, just the behavior in general, you get more teach time on task for teachers, for students, for everybody. And I think SEL is a time maker, not a time taker.
And from a systems perspective, just to back that up, when we look at disciplinary infractions, we're talking about roughly 45 minutes of time taken away from the student, the teacher, and the administrator to handle each one of those infractions. So to put some numbers behind Keith's statement, but also I think it's important to talk about the way that we teach social and emotional learning in our school districts, and there is a definite need for direct skills instruction, but that's 1/3 of the approach, if you will. We also do academic integration, so these competencies and skills are embedded throughout the curriculum. We have math teachers teaching these skills during a math lesson. We have ELA teachers teaching science, social studies, And then we also use several strategies to warm up the climate. So we talk about climate and culture, academic integration, and then some time for direct skills instruction. So it really becomes part of the work that you do all day long. It's not something that you need to have 45 minutes on a Friday morning every week. You do want to have that direct skills instruction, but you need to have these skills embedded within academics, as well as the strategies you use to strengthen the climate and culture and build those relationships.
I would like to build on that by saying that along with the direct skills instruction and embedding the social and emotional skills into the actual curriculum, this is really where the adult development and the teacher development are. Because when the teachers are trained as part of any of these social and emotional learning programs to own the skills themselves and to master the skills themselves, and they are showing the kids on a daily basis how they manage. They're showing and telling, hopefully, the kids on a daily basis how they manage their stress, what they do when they're disappointed, what they do when they left their house and they found it was raining and they didn't bring their umbrella, and learning that by listening and watching the teachers manage their emotions goes a long way towards that direct skill instruction, but it's happening, as we're all saying, in the relationship in the room. And it's not a separate lesson.
So Robin, how do you hope a lot of the viewers for this will be teachers? What are steps they can take themselves? So obviously we would encourage any administrators or districts to be thinking about this around their own staff, but if you're a teacher, what can you do?
I would suggest, if you're a teacher, to encourage your principal to really explore bringing one of the social and emotional learning programs to your school, because the social and emotional integration into a school community is going to include adult development. I know that it's really important that the ruler approach, that we train leaders first and teachers, and from what I know of the other programs, that's the case as well, that there is adult training in all of the programs. They may not do it in the same sequence we do it, or we may not do it in the same sequence we do it, but that's part and parcel of what a teacher can do. And also there are quite a number of readings and books about really understanding yourself and developing the skills to manage your own emotions, studying mindfulness, studying allowing yourself to develop a practice of self-awareness training, so that you have some ability to manage your emotions, even if you haven't integrated a full-on social and emotional learning program. And that practice of action and reflection, of being what we call a reflective practitioner, is crucial, because you can't, we have a saying at the Yale Center, you need to name it to tame it. So if you're aware of what you're feeling, then you can begin to address it.
So just to take a quick pause from the conversation and encourage any of the viewers to post any questions. Thank you, Emily, for your question. We'll get to them at the end of the session, but certainly throw those up there if you have any. And also to remind you that there's the resources doc, which you can access from the Education on Air website, which has some of the resources that the panelists are talking about. So to link it to the digital world aspect of this discussion, how is the fact that I mean, I'm supposed to be an adult now, but I still get like the pressure of like posting on Facebook and how many people have liked my comments, and it must be so much harder for students. How can you add a bit more color to that pressure that students are feeling now, or not? I mean, I'm not an educator, so how are students in this digital world find ourselves in?
So let me jump in there if you don't mind. So I like to say that the blooming rose of technology has real thorns when it comes to social skills. I mean, I love technology and I use it often. However, our society now has so much screen interaction and far less human interaction. This is a huge drain on our social emotional skills. With face-to-face human interaction, we can better convey and understand our emotions as well as the emotions of the people we're talking to. We've all misunderstood a text or an email. That's why we have emoticons. But as we all know, emoticons are poor substitutes for real emotions. Perhaps more importantly, what we've learned through face-to-face interactions is really how our affection, our actions and words affect the emotions of the people we're interacting with. the screen can be real callous, a barrier to really feeling what the impacts of our words and actions are on others. In all, I think screens are really a poor substitute for human interaction. Social media is not a substitute for a social life, right? And an ocean of Facebook friends is not worth a handful of real friends. Students need to see the difference between emotions and emoticons, social media and social life, friends and Facebook. We got to teach them how to balance technology. Most of our students really need to revive and reconnect, you know, in theory, to choose life over tech, which is a lesson that we actually teach in the class that I teach. I teach this class, this lesson every semester, and believe it or not, it's one of the students' favorites. The last time I taught it, and it's called Reviving Digital Zombies. But the last time I taught it, one of my students asked, hey, are you going to send this information in a newsletter out to my parents? And I said yes. And when I did, I was surprised to hear her say, oh, thank God. My parents really need to hear this. You know, we think that teens are so addicted to technology, and in some ways they are, but they're also the most offended because from birth they've had to deal with adults and peers interacting with technology instead of them many, many times. And so this material really resonates with them. And I think what's critical is to learn to teach our students an understanding of balance, of mindfulness, like Robin Stern just said, of being present and of creating some kind of parameters around our social media so that we're still balancing that technology interaction with real human interaction.
I would kind of jump in there because, I mean, as an assistant principal, I mean, this last week I was actually working with a group of girls who have been instant messaging each other, and they started this huge conflict with each other because they didn't actually sit down and talk to each other. They were texting back and forth, and the first text was misunderstood, and then suddenly now they're all enemies, and I've been trying to deal with that for the rest of the week. So, yeah, it's really interesting. I've been like trying to teach them when we teach these specific communication skills and how to read each other and how to communicate in person, and then that all gets stripped away the minute they turn to texting and going on Facebook and things like that. So what we found was, like, I mean, we're really working with them. Okay, here's some different skills. Like, one, this is actually why writing is important, and good writing is important because you can actually communicate better if you're more specific, if you actually articulate, if you know, in your writing, if you're going to communicate in that medium. Otherwise, though, but in terms of emotional interactions, you know, really highlighting, that's probably the time when you want to interact directly, because you can then read reactions, you can read tone, you can read body language in a way that obviously you can't when you're texting. So it's been really interesting working with our students about that. I mean, these are middle school students I'm talking about right now, but in terms of them not even really thinking that part through, like, oh yeah, you're right, like if I had said this directly, she would have known that I meant it this way, but I just kind of sent a message, I didn't think about it. Now it's just sitting there, they all look at it, everybody reads it differently, and now I'm getting 20 different reactions, and everyone's angry because that's the mood they were in when they read it. So that's been interesting. And then on the flip side, what I see is, again, with our middle school students especially, but I think high school, this applies to high school as well, where students are trying to figure out their identity, and they're putting it out digitally on Facebook and trying to play with their identity in terms of the pictures they put up, in terms of the things they say, that just sit there. And when you're trying to experiment with your identity in a way that just is publicly static and people can, again, look at and address in the different ways and the ways they want to bring to it, again, it's a lot of pressure because students are getting all these comments from kids in other schools that before they never would have known, they never would have heard from. Suddenly, now these students that are just vaguely related to somebody else in our school are commenting on how they look, the pictures they're putting up, what they're writing, and suddenly our kids are even more self-conscious and really trying to play with their identity even more because it's kind of exponentially increasing the amount of eyes on them in a way that they're not quite ready for. So it's been interesting also kind of wrestling with that with our students of how do you try to experiment with your identity in a way that also doesn't bring that back on you, and maybe is doing it this publicly the way to do it, or maybe there's safer kind of smaller circles that you can run with and experiment with that without bringing on kind of these pressures. Yeah.
My little cousin posted something when he must have been, I don't know, 12 or 13 on Facebook, and I screenshotted it and saved it so that I can forever embarrass him about it.
Exactly.
He's since deleted it. But so what's the right age to start dealing with this question of identity online? Because it's going to stay there forever. And kids, even though I think it's Facebook like 13 you have to be, in reality kids are on their way to 13. When should teachers start bringing this into their classroom?
I mean, I would say immediately, right? I mean, it's just something. I mean, these, like, I'd see 2-year-olds playing with iPhones and going on, and they are able to navigate the tablets better than some adults I've seen. So, I mean, I feel like it's one of those things. The minute they enter the classroom,
But
we need to start talking about it.
I'd like to
Yeah.
share a perspective. I think it's important for us, for the thought leaders in social and emotional learning, to keep in mind that we have an opportunity now to influence the direction of future social media and technologies online in a way that we never have before. Because if you think about it, in the early 2000, in 1995, Dan Goleman wrote his book. Yes, it was based on the article that Peter Salovey and John Mayer wrote years before that, but nobody read it because it was in a journal, and Dan made it popular, and then the field, and we are all the result of that, the fact that the field was launched at that point. But digital technology was also growing up then. So the people who were inventing Facebook and Twitter and YouTube had not had an education in social and emotional learning because the field started at the same time. And so now that we are more entrenched and we have the opportunity to think about how to use existing digital tools to develop social and emotional learning competencies, and how to train people who are developing social and emotional competencies to then use those and embed them in new digital tools, I think that we can do a lot of good. I mean, yes, there are many problems and there are challenges, and I and Mark Brackett and our team at Yale work with Facebook to help them create a more pro-social and a more compassionate communication in their digital space for teens. But I also know that, for example, we could not be launching the Emotion Revolution and trying to reach out to hundreds of thousands of students without social media.
Good point. Very good point.
And I think, it ultimately allows kids to connect, and allows people to do things in asynchronous time, allows people to rehearse in spaces, and I think that we can really take advantage of that, allows for education of teachers and parents and resources to be online and to move at your own pace, so that when your technology is smart, you're able to move with it and learn and it learns you and you learn as you move forward. And so I think that there's a lot of good. And at the same time, it's very unfortunate when you think about teens logging onto their Facebook page and they're comparing their insides with everybody else's outside.
Exactly.
Those are like some of the downsides, right?
Right.
You're doing it all the time.
So if you're working with Facebook, maybe you can convince them to create some kind of emotional autocorrect, where when somebody types in something wrong, they suggest maybe you really mean this.
There's a friendlier way to say that.
Yeah.
So
Make it an advisement. Thank you.
digging a little bit more into this identity issue and this kind of putting your personality online, how would you, if you're a teacher watching this and you're like, okay, this is important. I know my students are going through this, and I'm going to set aside some time to talk through this. How would you approach that? What would be, how would you even begin to think about what you would do with your students?
So I do this every day, and so one of the things you can't do is you can't bury your head in the sand. You can't say, well, technology isn't my thing, and I'm not going to let it in my classroom. I think we really have to invite technology into the classroom and then teach students the parameters where it is acceptable. They're going to have to be able to be in a conversation and put away their cell phone just like they would have to be in a class. And understanding the right and the wrong times to use technology around others is a critical skill. And if we don't teach it, how do they learn it? And so I think that's really the first step is inviting it into your class and then creating some kind of, digital parameters, a digital diet, so to speak, of what's okay and what's inappropriate, what's appropriate use in my classroom. And then also educating them on digital citizenship and, the understanding of all that they're putting out there and how what you say online really does kind of echo for eternity. And I think those are the big things that we got to get across.
And I think it depends on their age as well, right? So I agree wholeheartedly with Greg that we need to start this conversation early. We have completely virtual. We have K through 12 virtual schools. Our young children, as young as 3 years old, are interacting with technology. So I think we'd be fooling ourselves if this isn't something we want to introduce to middle school. But offering, in terms of a real practical way, offering situational vignettes, letting them practice, doing it together, thinking through, reading some reactions, some case study, project-based type learning, and really looking at the competencies around self-awareness, how you manage yourself, how do you think that made others feel when this comment was posted. And I also think we need to talk about building relationships in a virtual world, because the reality is we're all sitting here on a panel and have met, two of us have met in person. I don't think any of the others have. But yet we have a professional relationship now that we've been able to connect, nurture, and continue to grow because of these virtual connections. And our students are going to be asked to do that more and more. So talking about how do you build and maintain effective relationships in a virtual society, we absolutely must systematically discuss that with our students from very early.
Good point.
Yeah, and I'd say the only other piece of it, technology is a communication tool, just as our voices, our body language, right? Like, just having students understand that, like, what is the purpose and how I'm talking to you, like, what am I trying to achieve, what am I trying to convey? Technology is the same thing, right? Like, what are you trying to convey through technology? How is it best used to convey that message? And maybe at times, maybe it's not a method that you can convey that message, so maybe we need to choose something else. And having just that honest conversation too, because students, it's just as natural to them now, maybe more so in some cases than talking to each other on the phone or anything like that. So, right, just really acknowledging that too. It's an extension of our communication abilities, and so to do that effectively and positively is to really understand the purpose behind, why you're using that way to convey what you're trying to say. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really smart. And just because technology is here doesn't mean that we have to use it all the time. And we are still the people thinking about it. So we have to be mindful and smart about how we're using it.
So one last plug for questions, if anybody has any. In about 5 minutes, we're going to wrap up and we'll start answering those questions. So if any viewers have them, please enter those in using the Q&A app. So going directly to what was said before, what if you're a teacher who's not comfortable with these technologies themselves? Like for me, if I was trying to help someone deal with Snapchat and the complications of disappearing messages and that sort of thing, I wouldn't have a clue because I don't use Snapchat. For potentially an older teacher, and it doesn't have to be an older teacher, but I suspect it's more common amongst older teachers who aren't on Facebook, who aren't on LinkedIn, not that the students would be on LinkedIn, where can they go to get some of this understanding that they need to be able to help their students, or do they need to, or can they do it more theoretically?
I think they ask their students.
Yes.
No.
Yeah.
And it's a great opportunity for the students to hold a little workshop or to be the teacher at the moment.
What a great idea. Student voice about digital citizenship. Maybe they could have a student-led PD for all the teachers on campus.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And we know from having conducted many focus groups around Facebook that kids have a lot to say.
Sure. And student voice is critical. It's a big part. It's very intertwined in social emotional learning. We've got to get their voice if we're going to get the kind of climate and buy-in that we want.
Yeah.
That's exactly right, which is why you all need to join the Emotion Revolution. And I'll send you the information, but seriously, it's really important. We really want to hear those youth voices.
Yeah, just jumping off of it, I really want to emphasize that part. Like, the students, they know where it doesn't work. They know the sort of fights that have gone off because they went online and didn't handle it in person. So, yeah, for teachers trying to figure that out, like, the students can identify the strengths and weaknesses if you guide them enough and ask real honest, curious questions. Like, they'll take you right there and be able to do most of that thinking for you.
There's a nice comment that's come up from Kathy. I talk to my elementary students about their digital footprint. I give them the comparison of stepping on wet sand or stepping on wet cement. The sand will wash away, but the cement will be there forever. Their digital footprint is cement. Which is a nice metaphor for Kathy.
Nice metaphor.
It's like that.
I will borrow that, Kathy.
That's great.
So we've spoken about some of the challenges now. And earlier we spoke about Greg's method for bringing technology into the solution as a way of being able to connect with our students' emotional states in a potentially in a less threatening way. Has anyone else seen any other innovative ways of using technology to support social and emotional learning?
Well, I think right now the work that Facebook is doing in conjunction with Yale and with UC Berkeley and other thought leaders in this space is really pro-social and designed to support kids who are both the target of unpleasant behavior online and also kids who are doing that behavior online that other people think is unpleasant, and give them alternatives to help, to give them the support to ask for help to other people. And there are a lot of people in that space now helping kids to reach out and to get help. Crisis Text Line, which is an offshoot of Do Something organization that reaches kids directly, does something. Greg, it sounds a little bit similar to what you're saying. I think we were talking about coming in the morning and being able to text or look at what people were feeling in the morning. And Crisis Text Line gives students an opportunity to, or anyone an opportunity to say, hey, I'm not doing well, I'm in trouble. And then counselors can get online, we'll get that message right away and jump in and address that right away. And so I think that that's an amazing service. There are other organizations who are doing that kind of support within their own wheelhouse for kids and for adults. Right now, Facebook has a big resource center that we were privileged to be part of building that helps teachers and parents as well as teens to deal with bullying incidents by helping them set up for a conversation and actually have words to say during the conversation.
That's great.
Yeah. Another thing we're doing that has been, I mean, speaking of student voice, one thing we do is actually have students create their own kind of videos and presentations that they add to our own database that we share with the students. So for instance, we do a lot about coping skills, and we make little kind of guiding videos and things like that about different coping skills that students can try, but then they will share back and kind of put on their own that adds to our collection of coping skills that they use in the classroom or in situations at home that work for them that maybe as adults we never would have thought of on our own. And so they're actually just creating these on their own. We're teaching them, kind of guiding through that process, but then they're putting it back. Students are practicing those, learning those, adjusting them, making their own, and it's becoming this kind of little live thing where kind of this back and forth where we're building out together from teachers to students and back and forth again. We've seen that kind of build a lot of steam where the students can kind of take what we're talking about in the classroom but then go run with it a little bit outside and really apply it in a way and share it with each other. We've seen a lot of that the students really like. It's fun for them, but it's also been really great for us.
That's great. So we're running out of time. I just want to give each of the panelists an opportunity like to either to share one final parting thought, and one thing that if you could encourage people to go away and do after watching this, like what would be a message that you would want to share with the audience?
So if you don't mind, I'll start there. So the reason I'm involved with this is I'm a man on a mission, and my mission is to make sure that every freshman gets an engaging, collaborative, high-quality social emotional learning-based freshman seminar. I believe when you do this kind of practice, you get a teacher who specializes, you get a climate that is a much more positive climate, and you're able to do a much deeper dig. It needs to be a real course, you know, and you know, a lot of SEL initiatives, unfortunately, are a mile wide and an inch deep. And you know, you don't get the kind of impact with that. I think that what you need to do is create some kind of dedicated course with a trained professional who is supported, and that's what we've done here, and that's what I'm involved in. And we created a freshman seminar in Austin Independent School District that really focuses on social emotional learning, and then School Connect, which is the curriculum that I work with, then revised their curriculum, which is designed for high schools, to tie in, you know, how do you build that into that type of a class. And what the results we've seen have been just huge. You know, we've reduced failures in our freshman class by 41%, and discipline referrals in our freshman class by 71%. And I think that if we get a course like this, especially to students at transition, I think you can really transform a school, and especially at the elder grades when some of these issues can be very explosive if they're not better addressed. And I always talk about, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And I think the real question for educators is, which side of the quote do you want to be on? Do you want to be on the prevention side of the quote, or do you want to be on the attempted cure side of the quote? And some of these issues are so extreme that a cure is very difficult and extremely costly. And I think that all of us really realize that we need to be on the prevention side, and not implementing these types of programs, as our former superintendent said, Dr. Karstarfin, really not implementing these programs is educational malpractice, and we all need to get off and go do it.
Trish, any thoughts?
I would just like to encourage the classroom teachers that are watching to read up a little bit, and if you can do one small step, I would say focus on building relationships with your students. Read up. There's lots of activities you can do in your classroom, whether or not your school is going to roll out full board. But focus on finding out about your students beyond their academic performance. It's easier in the elementary level. It's more difficult when you have 180 students on your roster. But focus on building those relationships, shaking their hands, greeting them in the morning, saying goodbye when they leave. That's the first step, is really focusing on them getting to know you as a human and you getting to know them as a human. So find out as much as you can. I think we've all posted a ton of resources, but focus on those relationships with your colleagues and your students, and I think you'll notice great change pretty soon.
Great. Robin?
I'll build on what you were saying, because of course it's a basic human need to feel seen and understood, and when your kids feel seen and understood, that's what we want with them having a great day. And I would add to that in order for you, the classroom teacher or the school leader, to do that, or the parent, you need to check in with yourself and make sure that you know what you're feeling, manage what you're feeling, what to be present with your kids. And I believe that's everyone's moral obligation to do that for themselves so that they can get for our kids.
Thanks.
Children will learn for their teacher more than they will learn from their teacher.
Good point. Well said.
And lastly, but not leastly, Greg.
Yeah, I mean, I just echo kind of what Robin was saying. I mean, I agree with everyone here, but just, yeah, start with yourself, right? You will be a better teacher, even if you don't necessarily roll out a curriculum in your classroom. If you are working on your own self-reflection, if you're really thinking through how your emotions are having you treat maybe a particular student differently or reacting differently to what's happening in your classroom, that alone will change how you feel about teaching and how the students feel in your classroom. And then once you start doing that, you'll probably just find yourself wanting to roll it out with your kids, because it just kind of it just builds on itself. But yeah, just start with yourself, and then that makes the best model for the kids.
Can I add one thing to what Greg just said? You know, one of the people that I work with, Caroline Chase, says that we're all on a journey. You know, SEL, we're all on a journey, and you know, all of us have talked about the importance of the adult role. And you know, it doesn't matter what I'm teaching in class. If I lose my temper when a kid's pushing my buttons, I just untaught everything that I'm teaching about how to manage emotions. And I really do think that understanding that we're all on that journey and starting with yourself and then bringing it outward, a private victory before a public victory, I think that's a really big point to take away.
Great. Well, thank you all. So, so that's the end of the formal hangout. I think I've learned a ton, and there's some great immediate actions that teachers can take. We have a few questions here that we'd like to get to now. And so, Lily, yours is a great thing, so I'm going to wrap up with what you wrote. Not a question statement, but it's a great one. There's a couple of questions, Greg, talking about the Google Forms idea you used to connect with your students. One is just, where is it? People want it.
Yeah, so I believe, is it in that document?
If it's not, can we...
Maybe not. Yeah, so if folks just email me, I can share. If you're on Google Apps, I can share the Google form. If not, I could share you a screenshot. There's a lot of different ways you could build it that don't need to be on Google necessarily. But yeah, I'd be happy to just kind of share out that document if folks want to reach out.
Great. So, and Greg's email address is in that resources doc. So yeah, please go in there and reach out to Greg. Margaret asks, keeping on the topic of the form, how does the teacher read the data quickly and sort the data? Is it just the case of just kind of scanning the spreadsheet, or do you have some sort of way to kind of raise issues to the top quickly?
Yeah, so I mean, it does shoot into a spreadsheet, but we have it. So we teach our students when they're communicating, we have a color scale of sort of that represents where they're at in terms of how close they are to needing help. So for us, purple and red means red is like I really need help right this second. Purple is like I'm not feeling it. So with that color scale, that's in the check-in. So what the teachers do and what I do is just kind of look through and do that quick scan on what the colors the students are saying, and so focus in first on, okay, if I see a purple or red, that's the first ones I'm going to read, and then kind of go from there. So even if you only have 2 minutes, you can kind of highlight really quickly which students at least are the kind of asking for the most help right off the bat, and then obviously taking the time later to make sure you're reading all of them. But for that quick scan, yeah, that color kind of trigger helps find it quick.
I would like to, real quick caution, I think this is a great idea, a brilliant idea, especially for somebody that's monitoring campus-wide. I just would like to caution that I don't think this is a substitute for a teacher physically checking in with students. I think, checking in at the door and greeting at the door and really reading the emotions of the kids walking into your room is a critical skill. And I think this can be an additional support, but I think making that individual deposit at the door with every student as they walk in is really a critical piece to building the kind of relationship that makes teaching possible at the highest level.
Yeah, and I'd emphasize here, I mean, for us, this doesn't work without the teachers physically, like in person responding. So, like not just reading it, like coming back and like, hey, you wrote about this. Let's have that 1 minute, 2 minute, whatever. Like that conversation about what you mentioned. Yeah, without that sort of human follow up, this would be kind of pointless.
So, in fact, just quickly, Anna, I don't fully understand the question. So if you could rephrase that slightly. Frank. Frank wants to know, we've spoken about learning to handle stress and prevent stress. How do you do that? What are some ways that a teacher can bring that into their classroom?
So every SEL curriculum that exists has quite a bit of resources on stress management, and there's lots of great ones. It really depends on what level you're talking about, and I wouldn't want to push one or the other. Obviously I'm a co-author of School Connect, which is a 9th through 12th grade one, but there's a lot of other good ones out there.
And it's on the resource list. There's I believe in the link to our website, there actually some of those coping skills lessons and kind of video presentations are in there, so they should be able to access those and play around with those from ours too.
And we have them too from a pre-K through 12 level. If you're interested in a particular grade level, we can email you some of the sample lessons and resources as well.
Okay, I think that's it. We're coming to the hour now. Anyway, just a reminder that a lot of these resources are available in that doc that's through the website. So there's a ton of stuff about Alpha. There's a ton of stuff about Washoe County School District. There's a whole implementation plan and everything. And there's the stuff that Keith was talking about and that he's doing with maps. So definitely jump on there, have a look at all of that stuff. That's great.
Can I send some resources in?
Definitely, we'd love that. Yeah, we'd love to add some stuff. That would be great. So we'll develop on them. So so check in on that doc definitely. And then just to finish it up, I'll just finish with Lily's statement. Thank you so much. Concrete coping strategies for dealing with stress and anxiety is fundamental. The mental and physical health of society of young people and future generations is on the line. Parents need to be educated about what this is all about. I care not because I'm an educator, which I'm not. I'm just a parent of an 8-year-old, and this is already critical. I'm so moved by what you're all doing, it matters so much. So thank you to our panelists. I think it's been well received. I think it's shown us the importance of social emotional learning, and it's hopefully given some kind of concrete next steps that people can take to bring this into the classroom if they're motivated to do more. So, so thank you, and yeah, we will start broadcasting.
All right, thank you very much.